you have to get people to trust you, and not only from the standpoint of you have to reassure people that you're not going to just take their money and fly to Cabo, but you also have to gain people's trust that you're going to manage their money in a way that's going to actually make a return. And a lot of people that want to do this haven't figured out their own money ahead of time. They haven't figured out how to manage their own money. So why would anybody trust them?
Hi, Adam Gower here, founder of GowerCrowd.com and host of this podcast and YouTube show, The Allocator, where I am researching and learning and talking to participants in this new sector of the real estate industry, the capital allocator. And my guest today is the very charming Elijah Iung. And Elijah runs Legacy Way Holdings. He has a very interesting background. And probably the biggest highlight of today's episode is that it was his first ever podcast. Oh my goodness me, and he ended up with me. So sorry about that. It wasn't straight down the runway. So we didn't get into his background and life story as you might expect in podcasts. So definitely look out for him on other podcasts because I know he has a really good story. But what he does talk about in some detail is a deal that he did last year as a capital raiser. And he's really detailed about that. And it's extremely interesting to learn how that deal went together and how Elijah's corner of the capital raiser world evolved, because undoubtedly it is similar to other people. But you will also notice very, very different from anybody else that is on this podcast series. All right. So you'll see a different perspective. If you would like to know more about Elijah, go to the Gower Crowd website, gowercrowd.com. And while you're there, find the podcast page. All right. I'll include links to his bio and his website and other good stuff. But while you're there, do be sure to subscribe to the Gower Crowd newsletter. It comes out every week. And in it, I share my stories and lessons learned in real estate, as well as tips, tactics, and techniques for raising capital, what to look for if you're an investor, and then some fun stuff as well. How to improve your LinkedIn profile, I'm really into at the moment. Some AI tactics, and it's kind of a smorgasbord, but all totally focused towards real estate professionals and investors, all there at gowercrowd.com. Okay, let's get on with it. Elijah Iung, here he is. Elijah, nice to meet you. We have connected on LinkedIn, as everybody seems to these days. So I'm delighted to have you on board. This season of my podcast series is all about capital allocators, raising money for other people, basically, in real estate. So I understand it, that's what you do. But why don't you tell me? Oh, by the way, thank you. This is your first podcast. Oh my goodness me, I'm so thrilled and so flattered that you're doing that. So this season, I've not been asking people about their history and background because typically they're on 100 podcasts and you can hear about that anywhere you want to go. But I want to ask you briefly, because you had a little exit, didn't you? And that's what got you into real estate. So why don't you get to what you're doing today and how you make money as a real estate allocator, capital allocator today, but start with how you got there as well, will you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely an honor and a pleasure to be on here, Adam, with you. I've started following you a little bit and learned to know some of your stuff. I'm on your email list. Very good stuff on there. Everybody sign up.
Thank you.
And so, yeah, a little bit about my background. I actually started out in real estate buying farmland. As anyone that follows me on LinkedIn sees, I post about a lot. But I like the asset class for the stability, but it's probably not for everybody. But I started out, I just genuinely wanted to farm. That was my goal. I fell in love with it. Spent a summer on a tractor with no shirt mowing hay and had the time of my life, and that's what I wanted to do with my life. So I started a business at 18, and my boss at the time helped me get started. And he actually passed away from COVID.
Oh dear.
But he helped me get started, and he bought a tractor and did a lease to own. Anyways, details, but started that. It was a waste management business, and the thought process was literally find something nobody else wants to do and get as good as possible at it and charge what you want.
That's
So,
right.
so very, very simplistic. I like things simple. I still do. But did that for 10 years and finally figured out why nobody wants to do that. And
Right.
so I finally
This was
exited.
cattle waste, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. Yep.
All right,
From
so
large
basically,
dairy
I'm going to
farms.
say, even though this is for no children on this show, but you were basically shoveling shit,
Yeah,
right?
basically.
That's
Yeah, with heavy equipment, but yes. In the basic
all
form
right.
is
But you
that.
did quite well out of that, didn't you? So you sold that business, you made some money.
Yes,
That's
yeah,
right,
made some
right?
money, and I had been buying farmland all along, but started to become interested in real estate as an asset class. As I grew the business, I began to find that much of my net worth was growing from equity in these investments, these farmland investments, which farmland is not, it's not a high cash flow proposition by any means. And so I kind of fell in love with the asset class and started to look at, well, how else can I do this where it actually services the debt, kicks off cash flow, depreciation, all the many reasons that everybody invests in multifamily. So I found multifamily and started
How did
investing.
you find multifamily?
Oh,
How
I
long
hate to
ago was
admit
that,
it.
by the way, Elijah? How long ago was that?
Uh, Years ago.
How many?
Uh,
5?
yeah, probably 4 or 5.
Okay.
Yep. I
All
hate
right.
to
So
admit
anyway, so
it.
you found multifamily, and how did you get to raising capital for that?
So I joined a mastermind and learned everything I could about it. Started devouring books and learned to know a few sponsors and got to. I made some LP investments first, which I recommend for anybody. So I have LP investments all over the Sun Belt and up the Eastern Seaboard. And then, so I made some LP investments and decided I wanted to actually get involved as an active capital raiser. And so I raised $1 million for a project this summer. That was my first as a co-GP. And
Okay, hang on. So hang on, let me pause right there. So you raised money, $1 million as a co-GP. Describe, let's get into the DNA of that. What does
yeah,
that mean? What does it mean? How did you get into it? If you can, share with me who the sponsor is and how you structured it and negotiated it and like
sure.
describe it. Let's do that for this podcast. Do that as a case study. That's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So first raise is all about your the network you have that's already existing because you can't grow a network or it's very difficult to grow a network if you have no history, right? So uh, for me, it boiled down to going through all my contacts in my phone, finding out who I thought would be interested in something like this. I had started to build up an email list ahead of time. I had maybe 100 contacts and had started sending out an email and had started to kind of try to warm up the leads.
How did
But
you find the deal though?
the deal itself,
Yeah.
the sponsor was actually my coach in this the mastermind that I was a part of.
Ah,
So I got to know them. It's Lake City Equity out of Charleston.
okay.
And so we got to know them and ran several deals by them and had them checking out my underwriting and learning that way. And so they brought me a deal and they said we'd love to bring you on as a co-GP, but we need you to commit to $1 million.
Okay.
And I had been thinking I could maybe raise 500,000,
So what does it mean to be brought on as a co-GP? What does that mean exactly?
Sure. Well, do you want me to just go through a little bit how a syndication works?
You can do, but let's like, again just exactly in the context of this deal. Yeah.
Yeah. So as you know, a syndication is a group of general partners that put together a deal and reach out to their existing limited partner network to raise money. And each one has a specific role, whether it be capital raising, asset management, um, uh, acquisitions, Some of them have as simple of a role as a key principal or a earnest money. So I was involved in uh, uh, several different ways, from inspections to earnest money to capital raising, and then I help out on asset management as well. So I'm sort of a very junior partner. It was a massive deal.
How big was the deal?
40 million.
40 million of equity or 40 million of total purchase price?
$39 million purchase price. So
Okay.
21
And how
million.
much equity?
Is a $21 million raise. So
How much? 21?
yeah,
Why so much on a $39 million deal?
because we raised everything we raised for a 6 month, 6 months of reserves. Sorry, 6 months of reserves.
Uh-huh.
And then it was a value add play, right? So it was, we raised all the renovation money up front, and we did fairly low leverage as well to reduce risk. So
Okay.
65% loan to value.
Okay, so Lake City, they came to you and they say, "Hey, look, we've got a deal, and we need to raise some money. So if you can raise $1 million," what did they say? So what was the quid pro quo for doing that? In other words, what did they give you? Sorry, I'm like sprouting Latin.
Yeah,
What
yeah,
did they
yeah,
give you?
yeah.
Yeah.
It was a. I mean, it's a percentage of the GP, right? So a certain percentage of the GP is capital raising. Some of it's earnest money. Some of it's asset management. And so being able to raise that much, they don't have 100 different partners. So they want somebody that can bring in a decent amount and be involved.
Okay.
And so that was the reasoning there.
So how are you compensated?
So I get a certain percentage of the acquisition fee, asset management fee, and then as you know, the general partnership starts to get paid after the LP preferred return is paid out. So then I would get a split of the GP split.
Okay, and how is that number calculated?
Oh man. The GP split.
Yeah, so the GP. So in this case, do you remember what the numbers? The pref was what? What was the pref on this deal? Do you remember?
8%.
8 pref, and the promote, the split. How was that? Kind of the vanilla
70-30.
70-30. So did you get for your invest? Did you get preferential terms from the sponsor for raising that $1 million?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So no, not necessarily, other than the percentage of the GP. So some fund of funds operators will get a 10 pref or whatever it might be. This is just a different it's a different version of that. It's a different structure.
Okay. So
yeah.
in this case, you got a percentage of the GP, that 30%. So there's 70-30. They're holding on to 30%, right, of the profits
Right.
after investors have got their pref
Right.
and that presumably their money back. I'm just guessing that's the structure.
Right.
So they keep 30%. That's their promote. And you have a certain percentage of that. How was that percentage calculated amongst all the 12?
Yeah. It's based on, I put up a certain amount of earnest money, so if I put up 20% of the earnest money, and earnest money is, I don't remember what the number is, 10% of the GP, I get 20% of that 10%.
Ah, I see.
And then capital raising is, I think, 40% of the GP. So if I raised whatever that is,
so if you raise 5%, $1 million of 20.
If I raise 5%, whatever, right?
You get 5% of that 40.
Of the GP, right? Exactly.
Okay, I see. How did that go? What was the experience like selling real estate securities to friends and relatives? It's like selling insurance. Oh,
Yeah, it's tough, right? It's a lot of cold calling, and you don't know how much you can raise till you get started. At least in my experience, maybe it was different for you, but it's like, well, I think I can raise, I think I can do this, and I put a significant amount in myself as well, but then you get started, and you're like, yeah, you realize how unprepared you really were, right? You find all the holes in your plan, and so yeah, it was a lot of cold calling, a lot of emailing, a lot of following up. I probably annoyed some people, but in the end, I was able to raise exactly what I said I was, and so very proud of that. But
and did you
you know,
invest as well, Elijah?
yeah,
Did you?
I invested myself. Yep, I was the largest LP in my own raise.
Okay. And then how did you structure that? So the only compensation, oh, you got compensation, you got a share of the GP piece somehow calculated.
Right,
You get some fees, asset split of asset management fees. You get presumably a small piece of that because there's so
right.
many people involved, and a share of the acquisition fee. What was the total acquisition fee on that $39 million? Do you remember what percentage it was?
I don't know the exact number on that. I think it was like 3% acquisition fee
3%. Okay.
on a, and that's high, right? Like
It's
that's
high.
higher than what I would charge as the lead, but it depends a little bit on the raise, right? If it's a large single LP for this lead sponsor, it would be a significantly smaller acquisition fee as well because it's less work, right? Um, but yeah,
Is it less work? That's a big assumption. I
right,
mean, when you buy real estate, if you're doing it properly, it's basically the same amount of work. If
right,
you're buying a $10 million deal or a $100 million deal or a $40 million deal, you still got to do it properly.
right.
Right? So I'm not sure that there's voice of experience here. If you're doing it right, there's actually should be the same amount of work. So how did you find that? How's it doing? Well, hang on a minute. It's just the last summer, so you've only just gone into this deal.
Yes,
What is the deal? It's a value add multifamily deal. Where is it actually?
it's in Savannah.
Georgia. You
Yep,
said with a southern accent. Okay, so Savannah, Georgia. And how's it performing? Is it performing to pro forma?
it's doing well. It's at 88% occupied. We're shooting for 90%,
Okay.
and I think it should be there in the next month or two here. And it's for 25. It's I think it's doing 10% over pro forma NOI. So it's doing well so far, but time will tell. I mean, this is a long game, right? As you well know. So
Right. And your investors, they get the standard, they get the same terms as you, an 8 pref and a 70/30.
yep, exactly.
Interesting. All right. And was that the same structure, do you know, that other GPs put in place? Did you set up a fund? You set up your own fund, did you?
No, I worked as a co-GP. Um, I needed real estate professional status, and so that was one of the projects I was working on through the year that helped me achieve that. Right.
Okay, so hang on a sec. But how did your investors come in? Did they write checks directly to the entity, or you didn't have a single purpose entity, an SPV or SP to bring your capital in?
Uh, that was all done on the lead sponsor side. Um, so it wouldn't have been an SPV.
So how did the lead sponsor know that an investor was your investor?
Um, we used cash flow portal. Are you familiar with cash flow portal?
Yes.
Yeah, and so all that is all in there.
So when somebody invested, they said, "I am with Elijah," did they?
Exactly. Yep.
Interesting. And so what was the hardest thing you found actually doing that, would you say?
The hardest thing about raising money for my first deal,
Mm.
it would have to be cold calls, right? They're the worst. Um, you know, getting leads warmed up to the point where people we're ready to go. That's kind of, I mean, that's the tough part, right? So I think, so going forward,
Mm.
and I don't want to get into your next question, but uh, so going forward, that's what I'm working on now is building an email list,
Ah,
providing value to investors ahead of time, helping them to learn to know me and how I do business, so that when I'm ready to do my own deals, it's going to be a smoother process, we'll say.
so are you out of the farm? So when you sold out, your website says multi seven figure numbers. What does it say? Multiple seven figures. And so what kind of real estate have you been investing? Have you only been investing in multifamily and farmland or anything else before you started doing capital raising?
Yeah. So I had done deals on my own, from a duplex to an Airbnb to I've got a gas station project actually that helped out with capital gains tax, and so that was kind of it was all my own deals, and yeah, farmland. I tried the duplex in my local town thing, and I tried the Airbnb thing because that's the kind of thing that you do when you're trying to get started in real estate. Is what do I want to do? Well, I found the duplex in my hometown wasn't where I wanted to go, and the Airbnb wasn't the thing I wanted to do. So
Right.
um, multifamily has been, yeah, I really like it as an asset class. I feel like the future is bright, with multifamily. So
Okay, so we actually have gone through extremely quickly. And I can't believe how fast we've already hit almost half an hour. So I actually have some final sounds like very fine, but five rapid fire questions. So let me
all right.
ask you these as we start to wrap up. By the way, I will tell you, I feel bad not having asked you all about yourself and your history and your background, because that is the traditional podcast topic. But share that on the next podcast.
Yeah, yeah.
And people will learn about you that way. On this one, what you're doing now is very, very cool. I appreciate you sharing it. So here's some lessons. I've got some questions. Here's final questions. First of all, Elijah, what's been the hardest lesson you've learned in real estate?
I don't know that I got a great answer for you there.
Dump,
So far,
dump the
I
guest.
haven't learned any super hard ones yet.
Ah,
I haven't lost money yet, and so I'm a little wet behind the ears yet. But
okay. All right. No
um,
hard lessons. Well, that's good to hear.
yeah,
All right. Well, let's move on. Maybe we can find some other something that reveals some more thoughts that you have. So finding investors. So you raised from friends and family, presumably for this first one, which is very, very nice. But you want scale.
yes.
So what are you finding is the most effective way of building your active investor network?
So I'm working on a couple different avenues there, and they're both a fairly steady drip of leads, but nothing crazy, which is fine. So I'm utilizing LinkedIn,
Mhm.
just like you, and then I'm a part of a few different masterminds, and so I have a, a, a free downloadable guide I offer to people that as they join masterminds. So as they're part of the one, and then just networking. I found that the best ever conference is awesome. So I love in-person stuff. We have a real estate meetup in Seattle here that is excellent. Very good group of people there. So um, it's yeah, I would say LinkedIn and reaching out to other members of the masterminds are probably the best so far.
And which masterminds do you like the most? You mentioned best ever, but that's a conference, isn't it? So what masterminds do you like?
Um, what I like Rod Khleif's The Warrior Program.
Hmm.
Um, just a really good group of people there, and the content is actually really good. And it seems like the yeah, I would say the network of people is very good there. So
And
that's my
are
two.
they investors, Elijah, or are they also capital raisers typically over there?
Some of both. Primarily people that join the program are wanting to be capital raisers or wanting to be GPs, right?
Okay.
But I just knowing people just a little bit, I know that probably most people won't get very. That sounds terrible, but like I think a lot of people will end up investing in real estate as an LP instead of going the active route once they find what all is involved, because it's complex and it's anything worth doing, it's worth doing right. So it's hard. Like doing things right is difficult, and so especially when it's on that scale. So I'm just trying to reach out and let people know I'm that I'm doing it, and that
You're a lovely fellow for not wanting to say that. But I will tell you that with absolutely no doubt at all, there are lots of people who, I'll say it for you, have absolutely no chance of
yeah,
being successful in this business. You see
yeah,
that
I
all
agree.
the time. Just as an FYI, my business, we take on, my company, we only take on, historically only have taken on major multi-cycle seasoned real estate professionals. I think of them as being gnarly with a G, not like cool, but they're just gnarled by
Seasoned,
experience. What do you say?
seasoned.
Seasoned, yes, hard seasoned.
Yeah.
And so I do see a lot of these conferences that take on really anybody and encourage everybody to think it's really easy and you're going to get rich really
Hmm.
quickly, which brings me on to the next question,
Yeah.
which is what do you think are the biggest challenges for why do you think it's so difficult that for folk? What are the biggest challenges that you've got to overcome uh, to become a capital raiser?
Yeah. Um, well, you have to get people to trust you, and not only from the standpoint of you have to reassure people that you're not gonna just take their money and fly to Cabo, but you also have to gain people's trust that you're going to manage their money in a way that's going to actually make a return. And a lot of people that want to do this haven't figured out their own money ahead of time. They haven't figured out how to manage their own money. So why would anybody trust them? Why would I trust you if you don't if you're not if you haven't built up a net worth for yourself? How can I expect you to build me a net worth? So for
Mm.
a newbie, that I would say that's the biggest thing, and I think that continues on. Like I think trust is the it's kind of the pinnacle of what we're trying to do here. And
What do you suppose is the biggest misconception about this world of capital raisers? What's the biggest misconception?
yeah, I would say kind of like we talked before, it's kind of that anybody can do it and it's easy and you just have to build an email list and just start blasting emails out and it's all automated and free and easy. And I'm finding it's very difficult, very expensive, and very time consuming, but it's the kind of thing I like to do anyway. So
Last question, advice for somebody thinking of doing it?
why?
Really, that's a good answer.
Yeah.
Really,
Why
why?
do you want to be active? Would be my first question. And if you have that clear in your head, then go for it. But um, I don't know that I have advice. It's just you're gonna have to get out there and start shaking people's hands, and you're gonna have to talk to people you don't want to, and you're gonna have to cold call people that don't want to talk to you, and um, yeah, you got to figure things out.
Elijah Young, Legacy Way Holdings. Your first ever podcast. We'll have it bronzed for you. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Adam. I appreciate it.
All right, that was Elijah Young on the podcast. Elijah, thank you so much for joining me. Really a pleasure on your first ever podcast. Like I said, we should have it bronzed for you. But thank you for joining me. It was really interesting to talk to you. And I did enjoy talking to you about farmland as well. Perhaps we'll do another podcast in the future where you can talk about that. I would love to hear more about that. Yeah, we should do that. We should definitely discuss that topic in more detail. Maybe not on a podcast, but in the context of your communication online, on your website, and on LinkedIn. And thank you to dear viewers for joining today. Appreciate it. Appreciate you being here. Interesting, right? Different approach to capital raising. that you heard about today relative to some of my other podcast guests. But thank you for being here. And that's actually all I've got today. So until next time, this is Adam Gower signing off.